I know we have had lots of conversations and productive dialogues all day, and one theme that has sort of been brought up in almost every conversation is energy and energy security. So we're really excited to talk about that today with two individuals who know this all very well, and we're going to set the table a bit before we dive in. So we're going to start with the Premier and have you just give a couple minutes about the province and sort of where the state of the energy sector is for you.
Sure. Saskatchewan is, the Central Prairie Province, be down to the southeast of Alaska some distance. We're about 1.2 million people, large geographic area, very well known for, what is, I'd say, the spinal cord of our economy. About 20 billion of our $50 billion in exports is in agriculture. But essentially what we do in Saskatchewan is we provide food, fuel, and fertilizer, or energy and food security to over 163 countries around the world. The most paramount relationship that we have in providing and being part of that energy and food security supply chain is with the United States of America. And I think that's true for all Canadian provinces. And so when it comes to the energy space that we're involved in, it's oil and gas. We're second, possibly the third largest Canadian producer of oil and gas. Uranium. We are and do produce all Canadian uranium. And ship that around the world. I think we have one of the representatives from Cameco here that has now moved into the nuclear space as well. You're seeing investments now into the critical minerals, but even more so into the rare earth element space for preparing our energy future, if you will. And what we really like to talk about when it comes to energy security is energy security in the province of Saskatchewan is one thing, and it's important. Even in the nation of Canada, that's another thing, and it's important. What I think we really need to focus on is North American energy security, because if we aren't talking about North American energy security as regional leaders here, or as people that live on the continent of North America, who do you think is going to around the world? And I think that's really where we center a lot of our focus when it comes to what role do we play in the supply chain or in providing energy security to our allies around the world. Most notable and important among those is the United States of America.
Alaska, largest state in the United States, 2.5 times the size of Texas. It's our northernmost state, so we're an Arctic sovereign. We're the Western Pacific state. We project pretty far into the west of the Pacific Ocean. We're 1,000 miles closer to Australia than California, if you can wrap your head around that. So we're Arctic and Western Pacific sovereign. We helped pioneer, we were the first to pioneer LNG exports in the world to Japan in the 1960s, late 1960s. We are an oil and gas giant. North Slope is the largest field ever discovered in North America. We're still producing about 500,000 barrels per day. We hope to increase that with our Willow Fine and Pica Fine. We're hoping to get up to 700,000 barrels, maybe even 800,000 barrels over the next several years. We have 49 of the 50 of the world's rare earths in Alaska. Largest lead zinc mine in Alaska. One of the largest gold finds is in Alaska. Largest graphite find in North America is in Alaska. About 144 million acres of trees, if you include the federal state forests. Second busiest cargo airport in the United States is at Ted Stevens International Airport. Third busiest in the world. We're the gateway from Asia to North America when it comes to air cargo. 730,000 people, small county on the top of the world, spread over a continent that used to have 4 time zones. We have 200 communities that are off the road system. Some of those communities are more than 600, 700 miles away from Anchorage, Alaska. A lot of our population is made up of what we refer to in Canada as Indigenous folks. We call them Native Alaskans in Alaska. 20% of our population is Native Alaskan. My wife is Inupiaq Eskimo from the north of Alaska. And my 3 girls all work at a lead zinc mine, the largest lead zinc mine at Red Dog Mine, which is a Tech Cameco partnership with their native corporation. And one's an engineer, one's a logistics officer, and one's a buyer. But tremendous resources in Alaska, tremendous logistical location in Alaska. As I tell people, the next 50 years we believe is going to belong to Alaska because of our energy resources that are incredible. If you look at geothermal, 150 volcanoes, 50 are active. Second largest tides in the world after the Bay of Fundy. Incredible biomass opportunities, oil, gas, huge offshore and onshore wind resources. And so We're in the process of capitalizing on this as well as sequestering carbon. We have the capability in Cook Inlet by Anchorage to sequester 50 gigatons of carbon in that inlet. And in the North Slope, it's estimated 150 gigatons of carbon. So between carbon storage and potential hydrogen storage, again, we're poised to help the world if we can.
Well, you've touched on a lot of topics I want to dig a little bit deeper in if we can. I think we should maybe start with critical minerals. You've both talked about rare earths, critical minerals. That is also a topic that's come up throughout the day. It's a real opportunity for US-Canada partnership and collaboration. I would love to hear your perspective sort of on where we are today and how we can advance at a much quicker pace than we currently are moving. If it's ways that your administration can invest in it, ways that the federal governments can be partners, the private sector can be helpful. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that there's been some hindrances, I think, in private sector investment into the rare earth space in particular. And some of that has maybe come about due to just, who some of the major players are in the world. When we look at this space as, full disclosure, I'm cheering for the Oilers, and Wayne Gretzky was one of the best hockey players to ever play the game. But his motto, here. Sorry to the Florida fans in the audience. His motto was, go to where the puck is going to be, not where it is now. And most certainly when you talk about rare earth elements and how we are going to, power our future, they're a big part. And so what we did is we were looking for catalysts. We developed, all Canadian potash comes from Saskatchewan. All Canadian uranium is mined in Saskatchewan. And so we developed those industries about a half a century ago. And so we looked at, what were the catalysts in developing those mining industries, and how are we going to be part of that North American energy security conversation from the perspective of rare earth elements. And so we invested about $80 million in through an arm's length government organization called the Saskatchewan Research Council. To develop a rare earth elements processing facility. What we're finding now is that infrastructure is not only going to help us in developing and catalyze rare earth elements investments in Saskatchewan and in Western Canada or across the nation, but in North America. And it's really going to help us I think collectively advance that conversation around, what are we doing together, building out these supply chains, whether it's a mining supply chain, whether it's a processing capacity that we have in North America to ensure that we are taking care of our own and we are developing that North American energy security, because it is ultimately responsible for food security in general down the way. And so that's the investment that we're making in that space. And we look forward to, all sorts of collaborations, future collaborations with the private industry, the investment industry, other regulators like the state of Alaska.
Yeah, and from our perspective, the world is reordering itself. We oftentimes refer to the world as pre-COVID and then post-COVID. Pre-COVID, we had supply chains that we relied on. We had customers that we relied on. We had places where we got the resources from that we relied on. That's all kind of changed dramatically. And as the world reorders itself from a globalist perspective, to some degree to a regionalist perspective, I think North America, Canada, America, and hopefully Mexico, we can really prosper under that new view. We have tremendous opportunities, as the Premier has said. I mentioned some of the opportunities in Alaska. We already have partnerships with Canadian firms in Alaska in terms of mining and other investments. And we look forward to expanding those partnerships as well. And I think that's the key. I think if we can bring our two countries together, and we are pretty close as it is, but realize that the two of us together are really a pretty strong force to be reckoned with worldwide. We can bring back some of those industries that we have over in other countries such as China. We can increase our processing and our smeltering here in Canada and the United States. And I think through that partnership, it makes us both stronger, makes the world better, provides jobs for our people, returns an investment in a safe environment. I think it's a win-win across the board.
Absolutely. And as we think about critical mineral and energy projects, let's talk a little bit about local communities, right? More specifically, you touched on it briefly, Indigenous communities. Both Saskatchewan and Alaska have significant Indigenous populations. How do you think about working with the Indigenous communities to have a positive relationship and more inclusive policies as you move forward?
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned, in Alaska, our Indigenous population is 20% of our population, by far the largest in the United States of America in terms of per capita. We went a different route in the 70s in Alaska. We do have 228 tribes, but we have 12 very robust native corporations that have title to the land and the resource. And these corporations, in many cases, are multi-billion-dollar operations. Some of you probably do business with our native corporations, and they have a footprint all over the world, everywhere from Alaska to the lower 48 to Antarctica and other countries. And they are, our native folks are an integral part of not just our government, but our processes as well. And so if you're going to partner, for example, in my wife's native corporation, which is the NANA Corporation, if you're going to partner in Red Dog Mine, which is a Tech Kamiko operation in partnership with NANA, you partner with them. You help train our indigenous folks, our workers. You help share some of that revenue with our municipalities in that region of the state. What's interesting, and I want to put this out there, because of resource development in the state of Alaska, mining and especially oil on the North Slope, the studies have shown that our populations in those parts of the state, their life expectancy has increased almost 14 years. This is the largest increase in life expectancy of any subgroup we can see in research in North America and possibly the world in a short period of time. Why is that? Because once again, they're the beneficiaries of the resource development. Their people work there. They get revenue from that oil and from that mining, so they can build clinics, airports, schools. My mother-in-law once, and I'll leave with this, I asked her one time, Mom, what was it like in the good old days, back in the 40s, the 30s? And she said, son, they weren't really the good old days. The good old days happened when we started to get revenue for oil, when we start to have a clinic, when we start to have a senior center home. Those are the things that helped improve the lives of those people. So regardless of what you may see, or despite what you may see sometimes on the news when they're talking about Alaska and that there are indigenous people that oppose some of the resource plays up there, that's true, but the vast majority of our people, indigenous people, support the resource plays because the resource plays in Alaska are where the indigenous people are. They benefit from those resource plays through jobs, through revenue, as we mentioned.
I was thinking of the good old days. My grandfather, he lived to be 96 years old. He died in 2012, born in 1916. And he had told me at one point, he said, you know, everybody talks about the good old days and longing for the good old days. He said, they can have them. It's a lot better today. He says, I have air conditioning in my truck. I'm not riding or strapping an oxen through the field. And so we need to remember, you know, where and how far we have come. And I would say that, you know, we're very similar in our dynamics, population dynamics. In Saskatchewan, we're about 17% indigenous people in our province. And so as we grow and investment comes in that food, fuel, and fertilizer space, how do we ensure that everyone is benefiting from that investment? And so first is training. And so partnering with indigenous communities, indigenous post-secondary institutes to ensure that we're training for the jobs that are available and going to be available in the future, maybe in the rare earth elements processing space. Two is actually the creation of those jobs and ensuring that those jobs are available to everyone. And I'll share a story in the uranium industry at the close of this that shows the success that I think we're having and what we're really modeling some of the other industries after. And then three is ultimately how do you encourage ownership opportunities for all, whether there be ownership in the initial maybe mining stake or the oil field play that's there, or ownership by all individuals, indigenous or non-indigenous, in all of the service companies and the small and medium-sized businesses that are indirectly positively benefited by often these large central investments. And so the example I'll provide is in our uranium mining space, of which has been in Saskatchewan, operational in Saskatchewan by 4 major companies. Largely, Cameco would have have a play in virtually all of them, and now has moved into the nuclear space through their purchase, our partial purchase of Westinghouse, which is really a merger of an American-based firm now with the Canadian mining industry owning that nuclear space. And I think this is really a good place for us to center that North American energy security conversation as we move forward through the next number of years. But their mines are located in northern, rural, and remote locations. Many of them fly in, maybe with a gravel road for some of the product to come out. And they're running between 45 and 50%, often more than 50%, northern and indigenous employment. A similar ratio when it comes to the procurement of the companies that are maybe subcontracting out under doing some of the work that they need on the mine site or in some of the supply chain that they have. And so that's the kind of ethical impact that these investments can have in the most rural, remote, and often largely indigenous communities. And we see that in Saskatchewan. It's positive from a job creation perspective, a career opportunity perspective. And I would say it's equally positive with all of those, that central investment company and all of those other small and medium-sized businesses investing right back into their communities, into the hockey arena, into the cultural centers, investing back into making life a much better place, as my grandfather's words were a few minutes ago, in very, very remote communities. Many of them don't even have road service.
Well, speaking of remote communities, both of you face similar geographical challenges about communities that are remote or very rural. How do you think about and work on accessibility and affordability for those communities?
Well, in Alaska, we've had a tremendous broadband, infusion of funding for broadband in Alaska. As mentioned, we're a huge state. We lack a lot of infrastructure in the rural parts of our state. And in the last couple of years, we've been the recipient of billions of dollars. So we're building out our broadband and our connectivity in the state of Alaska. And we're hopefully going to move rapidly on that. We've got some projects that are in process right now. That's going to be a game changer for folks that live in Nome, for example, which is 500 miles from Anchorage with no road, or Barrow, which is probably 600-700 miles from Anchorage with no road. These will be game changers because the whole idea is to get the speed up to the equivalent of what's happening in the urban areas or in the lower 48. So from a e-commerce, from a health perspective, telehealth, from an education perspective, and as we enter the rapid advancements in what we refer to as the AI age and supercomputing, that's going to be absolutely necessary for our people to be part of 2024 and beyond. And so the broadband is a huge component. We have over 220 state airports that we maintain in rural Alaska to make sure that our folks can get in and out of Alaska and that goods and services can be shipped in and out of Alaska. And we are in the process of building new roads. We have a 90 to 100 mile road into areas that never had a road before called the West Sioux Road. We're looking at trying to get a road into a mining district, the Ambler Mining District. We're having a little bit of a issue with our federal government and permitting that process, but nonetheless, broadband, our airports, and the ability to get more roads out to rural Alaska.
And I think you really touched on, a few of the things that impact affordability, accessibility. One is roads, two is air travel, and three is data or building out our connectivity in our rural and remote communities. And we're in a very similar situation where we are investing heavily in our northern remote road network, investing heavily in airports in rural and remote and northern locations so that they can have access not only to southern communities, goods can have access to their community, but so then they can in turn have access. Many of our mine sites are fly in and fly out, and once you have an airport in your community, you actually have the opportunity now to have access to a great career. Now, how do you get a great career? By ensuring that you have the proper training to fill the necessary goals that need to be fulfilled in that particular career. And that's where the connectivity piece comes in. In my day back, and I won't date myself, you went to school where the school was, and you drove down the road and went to that school. And in my case, I moved to that community because that's where the school was. Today, you turn your computer on, and if you have access, broadband access or data access, you actually don't have to be in that community. You can attend the University of Phoenix, Fairbanks University, where a friend of mine played hockey a number of years ago, by the way. So the world is changing, as you had said, Governor, before our very eyes, and it continues to change. And we need to, work together with industry and governments to drive the opportunities that are coming at us. Learn from the opportunities in the rearview mirror, but ensure that we're working with industry so that we can fund and train our children, that next generation, for the opportunities that they're going to face. And they may be very different than what we looked at.
So you just touched on it briefly, but as someone who runs a business organization, I feel like I have to ask about public-private partnerships and the best way you see that business can be a partner in accelerating the North American resiliency. What do you think is the best opportunity? Governor, do you want to?
I would say, listen to everyone. I provided the uranium mining example and what that is, doing for northern communities. I was up there a few years ago. I go up every spring, sitting in the middle of a lake with no cell phone service for hours, hours away from me, with a number of northern residents, indigenous residents, and they're asking me, when are we going to be able to expand this uranium industry because it's good for our community. 25 or 30 years ago, I'm not sure we would have had that conversation. My dad works in it, I work in it, my brother works in it, my other brother works in servicing the industry, and so they're seeing the opportunity that is before them. And so I would say, listen to the folks in the particular areas of wherever you might represent, and then work with industries, and at the end of the day, and we won't get into various levels of governments in our respective nations, but at the end of the day, we need to focus on North American energy security, North American food security, and ensure that we have a competitive regulatory suite of whether it be environmental regulations, investment attraction regulations, so that we are competitive globally. And I think in fairness, you're looking at 2 jurisdictions that are.
So in Alaska, and it's similar to what the Premier said, I think the key is you talk to your business partners and you treat them as customers. So we're in conversations with a number of potential investors, and we're asking them to actually assess Alaska's environment, meaning, do the taxes work for you? Do the energy costs work for you? How can we help you with cheap land to locate your business? What are some other things we can do? So having that conversation, because a lot of times when you're a government official, you can become somewhat myopic and you're used to the rules and the regulations and the laws that you have before you. But if you're wondering why investment is going to other places, you've got to have that discussion with the private industry, the private sector. So those conversations, I think, are absolutely crucial. You see it happening all over the world and all over the lower 48, and I'm sure here in Canada. We're doing the same thing in Alaska. What will it take to bring your business to Alaska? What kind of jobs will you bring with it? What do you need in terms of regulation? What do you need in terms of tax regime? What do you need in terms of labor pool? Having those conversations is the partnership, in my opinion, that'll bring more investment to our respective sovereigns.
So we have just a couple minutes left, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about what you think the biggest opportunity is for the U.S.-Canada collaboration here, right? So where do you think your respective jurisdictions could collaborate more closely, or ways that we could help harness this relationship?
So I'm not going to get too political, but I would say that having our federal governments allow us to take advantage of every single opportunity. You'll find that in many of your provinces, and especially many of your states that I'm familiar with, that's what governors are asking for, is give us the opportunity to work with the private sector to develop mines, to develop locations for data centers, to develop more oil and gas plays, to develop CCUS, which we just passed the law up in Alaska. In other words, don't thwart opportunity because you want to somehow engineer society to have a different look. Before COVID, we were talking about things like Green New Deals because we wanted to, quote, transition. I think what you're going to hear more from people is additionality, not transition. Because if it's true what is being said, and I think most of us believe that your supercomputers, your quantum computing, your AI, and just before that, the attempts to green the world, you're going to need unbelievable amounts of electricity that we really can't fathom at this moment. You're also going to need the critical minerals and the rare earths and the strategic metals to undergird that. And it all should really be produced to a degree as much as possible here in North America. And so I think that would be my ask, is that from the federal government perspective, understand that this is national security, not just jobs, not just revenue, but national security for both of our sovereigns.
And whether it's the nation of Canada, the United States of America, or our respective states and provinces, we ask ourselves this question each and every day. Can you bring a project, whether it be any energy project, whether it be in the oil and gas sector, the mining sector, whether for us, uranium, whether it be lithium, whether it be, helium, some of the products that we have there. Can you bring it from essentially the exploration stage through the development stage to an actual producing site? And the answer to that question isn't the same in states and provinces across North America. And so if we truly want to be North American energy independent, we need to actually start answering that question correctly. And I don't know that we are right now at national level and a number of subnational levels as well. That's the question that we search and hunt for and seek the answer to in every development or investment opportunity that we have. And Governor, you spoke to it earlier about, you know, the site, the electricity costs, all of the different things that you need to navigate through in order for these investments to actually occur. And so the opportunity that I see is for us to focus on North American energy security. If we get that right, we're going to have our food security. If we get that right, we're actually going to have our general security, our safety of the North American way in the Western world. But it starts with affordable, accessible, reliable energy supply. It worked for my grandfather. Things got better throughout his lifetime, and if we want that to continue, we need to ensure that the answer to that question is correct.
Yeah, Jane, just to wrap it up, the only words of wisdom I would have is we're living in a chaotic world right now, but there's tremendous opportunity for those that can look out in the future and see what kind of world that we want to design. And as we're talking about on the stage here, we think we have a framework for North America. But tremendous opportunity. I wouldn't worry too much about the AI issue. That's going to have enough people focused on the negatives of that. But the positive, in terms of computing, supercomputing, a world that is going to be able to solve a lot of problems that we can't solve now, it's tremendous. So I think we're living in some of the most exciting times. Again, we just have to be able to be allowed to take advantage of the opportunities that we have before us and not have those opportunities squashed.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure, and I know we'll continue having this conversation. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. That was great.